This means credit card issuers can only charge interest rates of up to 2% a month on unpaid credit card balances. The BSP has also set the cap for loan TPE transactions or those paid on installments at 1%. The BSP said they're confident that banks will comply with the new policies, saying they coordinated with the Bankers Association of the Philippines, which the BSP says has expressed support for the new rules. Data from the Bangko Sentral showed that the average annual rate for credit card receivables ranged from 18 to 58% in the first half of the year. Dan, equities continue to take a hit as investors take profits, but it looks like the region is set for modest gains this last trading day of the month. How much hope, of the week rather, how much hope is there that we end this week in the green?
Well, I mean, you're close enough, Jess. It's almost the end of the trading month as well as another month has passed us by. But as you mentioned, today is Friday, last trading day. It's been a very volatile session. Take a look at how Wall Street performed overnight. Gains there, as you mentioned, the Dow Jones up by 0.2%, S&P 500 as well compared to the Nasdaq, which was up by 0.4%. But again, as I mentioned, that follows a volatile session where we didn't know which direction U.S. stocks were really going. This after so many comments came out from the Fed, and this is from Reuters. They quoted U.S. Fed Reserve Vice Chair Richard Garida as saying the U.S. economy remains in a, quote, deep hole of joblessness and weak demand, and they called for more fiscal stimulus. So again, it was all of these like language that was very, very bleak that came and hit the global stocks. Now, there's still a risk of a slowdown in the economic recovery, and this was what prompted Goldman Sachs economists to cut their forecast for the U.S. growth in the fourth quarter also yesterday. Meanwhile, we've been reporting this, and take a look at how Europe had performed as well yesterday, all in the red. They are re-emerging as a hotspot for COVID-19. The UK reported the highest number of new cases in a single day since the start of the pandemic. And you've got France's new infections jumping to a record. Anecdotally, I've heard that over in France, they've shut down gyms yet again. So you can see on my screens here, however, that Asia is looking at some modest gains. So the indices rather over in Japan, like the Nikkei, up by 0.7%. Hong Kong as well enjoying a recovery here, up by 0.5%. Over in Shanghai and Shenzhen, some modest gains here, but again, the term is really modest. If you take a quick peek at how we are opening, we are of course not having been really in step with the rest of the region. Today it seems that finally we are in step, we are up, but really very modest here, if you can even call this a gain. That's up by 0.02%. We're still at 5,800 levels. We have not broken back above the 6,000 levels. We have not been able to sustain that level. Now, Regina Caps Luis Lumingan is saying exactly what we have mentioned earlier on. Market participants struggling to shake off the worries of the offshore coronavirus issues and also the lack of a fiscal stimulus over in the U.S. Another thing that's going on that we haven't really reported, this from PhilStocks Claire Alviar, there are rising tensions again between North and South Korea. Now, in fact, you've got value turnovers yesterday standing at just a little over 4 billion pesos. Net foreign outflows, meanwhile, jumping to 293 million pesos. I just want to take a quick peek here at whether there are specific sectors that are pulling the weight. And you can see that properties are the bright spot this morning. That's up by 1.14%, together with financials, holding firms as well. But, it's again a very mixed bag, with industrials being sold off by 0.4%, together with services. Now, I wanted to take a quick peek at financials, especially after we had just reported what you had mentioned there on the credit card issue and credit card caps. And this has been an issue of contention as well, because it's something that might affect the financial sector. Of course, they make money from interest rates, and if they're not able to collect that, that is also foregone revenue for them. But take a look at the financial space. You've got Metro Bank surging by 1.2%, together with Union Bank BPI and SecB. Now, speaking of SecB, they've finally gotten the go signal from the Philippine Competition Commission. That is for Karungsri bank, which is actually looking to acquire 50% of their consumer finance subsidiary. So they've actually got a smaller subsidiary called SB Finance Corporation. These are actually involved in very small loans like motorcycle loans, and loans for teachers, for example. And this is from the Bank of Ayudhya, which is of course known as Kurung Suri. They will now be entering that area. This is a transaction that has been going on for quite some time. It had been announced already, but now it finally gets the go signal. Now, just to recall, this the parent entity of this Thai bank is actually the Japanese banking corporation Mitsubishi UFJ or MUFJ, which already owns an interest in parent Security Bank. So as I mentioned, Security Bank enjoying some gains there. Now let's pivot over into the Lopez group of companies. This, of course, as ABS-CBN had announced yesterday that its chairman emeritus and director, that is, of course, Eugenio Gabriel III, Lopez III, Gabby Lopez, has now resigned from his positions, not just as director of ABS-CBN, but also as director of Sky Vision, Sky Cable, First Philippine Holdings, First Gen, and Rockwell Land. Now, he did cite personal reasons for his resignation immediately, and they've already appointed someone to take over. That's going to be Mario Bautista. He will be taking over. This, of course, comes amid ABS-CBN not receiving an extension on its franchise and also having recently let go of 5,000 people. Now, this according to Astro Del Castillo from First Grade Finance. As he left already, so Gabby Lopez had actually already left ABS-CBN's day-to-day management, but still remained the face of the company. Given the heat that he had received, this could shield ABS-CBN and the family's other businesses from any potential political threat. Just a very quick peek at how ABS-CBN shares are reacting this morning. That's actually up by 0.4%. Lopez, the holding firm, however, unchanged this Friday morning, Jess.
Alrighty, shakeup happening over in ABS-CBN. Let's see how things are going to fare for them. But then yesterday we were talking about plans of the local boards to make it easier for them, especially for smaller firms to actually list. And now we are getting closer to possibly the biggest IPO in the country to date. What's the scoop there?
Can you imagine, Jess, in the middle of a pandemic where, liquidity is a question here and there's so much, need for cash, you might actually be seeing, as you mentioned, the biggest IPO ever. And this is from Converge ICT. So they've been, already expressing interest to list, but they finally got the SEC thumbs up. That's going to be, and you can see that on your screens here, a base offer of 1.5 billion shares, but with a huge over allotment of 223 more or less shares at up to 24 pesos per share. So what does that mean? It's a little over 11 billion pesos that they're going to receive immediately. But if they exercise that whole over allotment issue, they could actually raise up to 41.55 billion pesos. That's quite a lot of money there for expansion plans of this very ambitious fiber network operator. So this is going to be happening from today until October 2. That's just, garnering investor interest there. So what are they going to be doing with the money? 90% of it will support the capex as it expands nationwide. Now recall, Converge ICT is only currently in Luzon. So they want to do it worldwide. This is, of course, owned by Pampanga-based Dennis Uy. So it's different from Phoenix Dennis Uy. And they were already actually receiving private equity money. So this from Warburg Pincus, which already invested in them just last year. So the company has, despite this pandemic, posted a 45% income growth in the first semester. They saw an increase in subscribers. They have around 4.1 million already. So it's very interesting here. I just want to say also a couple of things on the telcos front. PLDT says they will be maintaining connectivity. Of course, they had announced that they will be doing maintenance on their submarine cables. It's from tomorrow until September 30, but they said they will found other ways to maintain internet connectivity. So not to worry. You've also got Globe Telecom stepping up. So they say that network upgrades will be completed by next year na. This, of course, follows President Rodrigo Duterte's call to improve the services in the telcos. They said they will accelerate cell site building and upgrade all sites to have now 4G and LTE network. And apart from that, expanding 5G, targeting the key business districts. You can see TEL, which is of course PLDT, unchanged today. Globe sliding a touchdown by 0.5%. So more on markets later in the broadcast. Just meanwhile, let's shift over from equities into the economic front. Things not so rosy for the rest of the economy. Jess, you've got S&P Global Rankings, the latest to chime in and flag several risks. Tell us more about that.
Well, Dan, it's not like we're expecting any positive growth, at least for the rest of the year. But this time around, what makes us different is that it's a huge sink or a huge drop, definitely from their previous estimates as to how we are going to perform for the rest of the year. So much so that it's actually going to be the worst in the region. So S&P Global this time around is projecting full year GDP to come in at negative 9.5%. That's coming from the negative 3% that they previously forecasted for the Philippines. This implies, according to them, minimal changes to subsequent years, implying a larger permanent loss in output. Now, if you try to compare their prediction or projection rather for the Philippines, it really is worse compared to the rest of Southeast Asia. Again, the Philippines for full year 2020, it's going to be negative 9.5%. That's only followed by India, which is expected to at least drop by negative 9%. Also, but focusing here on Southeast Asia, as you can see here, Indonesia would have to be one of the better performing economies here. Economy is expected to shrink by negative 1.1%. Vietnam, in fact, is the only country seeing growth at a positive territory of 1.9%. Now, according to S&P Global Ratings for Asia Pacific, they see the region shrinking by 2% in 2020 and growing by 6.9% in 2021. They are expecting China to lead that charge at a positive GDP of 2.1%. But zeroing in on the Philippines, what's the pullback here? Well, according to S&P, it's really the renewed lockdowns from August in metropolitan areas, including Metro Manila, together with lingering household caution amid the stubbornly high infection rates and at the same time limited fiscal policy support. These things, according to them, are suppressing consumer spending, resulting in wide job losses. Although, recall, of course, you have experts already seeing a decline in new cases here in the country over the past month. But at the same time, cases in the country are already nearing 300,000. So some experts now are cautioning against easing restrictions, especially in NCR, as nearby Calabarzon and Bulacan are still experiencing spikes in cases. Now, S&P is pricing in 2 more rate cuts from the BSP before a long pause. But let's just wait out for this year. S&P is forecasting a 9.6% growth in 2021, but they're saying they are expecting permanent damage to the corporate balance sheet and the labor market, leaving GDP short of where it should be without COVID-19.
Well, Jess, this is, of course, some bad news, and there's still even more bad news that you need to report because they're not alone in this eventual downgrade. There's also AMRO saying they might be seeing GDP to shrink even worse than we've already been dreading.
Well, definitely. We've already talked about this previously on the show, but there are more details to their at least downgraded forecast here for the country. And according to them, recovery might have to wait, full recovery at least, might have to wait until election year in 2022. Again, very briefly, they downgraded their full year forecast to negative 7.6%. That's coming from negative 6.6% previously, due primarily to the impact of the reimposition of lockdown measures since August. That's according to Jiwen Zhao, AMRO's country economist for the Philippines. They see us going back to growth, however, in 2021 via a 6.6% GDP. Although, according to them, growth at pre-pandemic levels might have to wait until 2022. That's hinging primarily on how the pandemic will unfold and the recovery of the global economy and how countries will actually come up with their policy responses. So definitely lots hanging on how economies are going to respond further on as the pandemic develops.
Let's check in on other headlines we are watching. Today is the last trading day of the week. Let me just scroll down here. It's a bit of a long script we've got this morning. Okay, the Action for Economic Reforms warns that the proposed tax perks for San Miguel's 740 billion pesos San Miguel Airport will set back the government's tax reform program. Now, AER co-founder Filomeno Santa Ana says the proposal to give San Miguel Aerocity a 10-year exemption from direct and indirect taxes as it constructs the gateway could set a dangerous precedent. He says it may encourage other companies to demand legislative tax incentives as well. Furthermore, Santa Ana says the proposal runs contrary to the core objectives of the government's plan to streamline the country's tax incentive system under the CREATE bill. And it's not just AER that's having doubts over the proposed legislative franchise for San Miguel Aerocity. In fact, Oceana, an environmental advocacy NGO, says the project should be put on hold until an environmental impact assessment has been conducted. Oceana Vice President Gloria Estenzo Ramos said the location of the project poses risks to public safety and food security, so granting franchise without an impact assessment is akin to, quote, putting the cart before the horse. PAGCOR said monthly regulatory fees collected from POGOs plunged by nearly half, as only a few operators had been allowed to reopen when the lockdown was eased. Now, only 32 out of 55 registered POGOs were allowed to resume operations in limited capacity, while just around 110 service providers out of the 218 accredited returned to business. PAGCOR's offshore gaming and licensing department said monthly regulatory fees collected from POGOs reached as much as 600 million pesos before the pandemic, but this was slashed to almost half due to the quarantine restrictions. Now, despite limited operations, PAGCOR also noted that licenses of 5 POGOs have been canceled, 5 more were suspended, and 42 service providers are in the process of having their accreditation revoked. PAGCOR booked a 1.5 billion peso net loss in the first half. That's against a 3 billion peso net profit in the same period of last year.
A measure that grants President Duterte the power to expedite the issuance of permits and licenses at national and local levels has been filed at the Senate. The bill seeks to suspend or waive requirements to secure key documents to help small businesses affected by the economic shutdown. The bill also authorizes the president to suspend or remove government officials who are non-compliant. Meanwhile, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce said they will ask the government to improve internet connectivity in the country and provide long-term incentives for businesses during the upcoming 46th Philippine Business Conference and Expo. The conference will be held online on October 7 and 8, and the top agenda is finding ways to ensure survival and recovery of businesses to continue providing employment. Now, taking off from that, the pandemic has set off a much-needed re-examination for enterprises as business continuity becomes a major challenge. And while the cloud has been here for the longest time, more organizations are making it a priority now to stay afloat. Now, to talk about cloud migration in the time of COVID-19, we have Rajesh Ganesan. He is the VP, Vice President for ManageEngine Division of Zoho Corporation. Good morning, Rajesh. Great to have you here with us on the show. He speaks to us live from Chennai, India, by the way. Good morning.
Yeah, very good morning, Tester. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Okay, to kick things off for the non-tech savvy out there, give us an idea first as to what is cloud computing. I mean, it has been here, like what I mentioned earlier, for the past years now, and it has been continuously evolving. So give us first an overview of what exactly is cloud.
Yeah, that understanding is important. So it's indeed a very question that we ask. So cloud computing is very simple. I'm sorry about that. Are you hearing any echo? Are you able to hear me okay?
Sure, I can hear just fine.
Okay, thank you so much. I get that off the thing. So talking about cloud computing, it's a very simple concept, right? So businesses early on in the 1900s, right? So they were running their own production manufacturing. They needed power. They needed electricity. They were producing their own power, their own electricity, right? So that's how the scenario was when manufacturing started. Similarly, when computing started, businesses had to spend a lot of capital expenditure to set up a computing infrastructure. This is like buying a lot of computers, a lot of hardware, a lot of specialized hardware. And over time, even computing became an utility, and much like electricity, computing could be delivered over a pipe, over a cable, and that is exactly what is cloud computing, right? So it's a very simple concept. We use cloud day in, day out, right? So this particular interview, for example, is completely happening over a cloud infrastructure. Previously, even 5 6 years ago, if this interview had to be like done live, you'd have to come to your studio or you would have to visit me. But today I'm sitting in Chennai, you are sitting in Manila. We are able to do this interview live. And this is one example of what cloud computing is.
But let's zero in now, Rajesh, on how this is impacting businesses, or how the pandemic is impacting businesses. You have now a lot of enterprises either closing down physical offices or having operations, basically making the home the new office here. So how has this accelerated the migration to cloud?
Yeah. So as you rightly said, the cloud computing has existed for the last 2-3 decades, but companies around the world, for reasons fair enough, had this reluctance to move to cloud because of reasons like security, because of reasons like maybe lack of awareness, sometimes even local regulations. They were always waiting to make the move to the cloud. But this pandemic, where everybody was forced inside their locations, wherever they were, whether they were at their home or wherever they were locked in. So this limited mobility sort of accelerated the move to the cloud for businesses, where people had no longer the option to go to work every day. They were forced to get work done from wherever they are, right? So this is the need for today. And this is one particular reason that really accelerated the migration to the cloud. This is one of the positive fallouts of this pandemic, right? So even though it's unfortunate for people around the world, this move to adopting technology to get work done end to end is one of the positive fallouts, as I say. And this really accelerated the move to cloud for the businesses as well as for consumers.
And do you think there's already a shift in mindset here? Because before, cloud computing was more or less discretionary for companies. Do you think it's something that's becoming mandatory all the more? And how has the pandemic affected organizational functions, and how has cloud been addressing that?
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So as cloud, I talked about, email today is primarily consumed from the cloud because you want to be connected 24/7. But when you talk about businesses, you have two types of activities, right? So one is your routine activities, and then comes your mission critical activity. If you are a CFO, right, your mission critical activities is to make sure your investments go in the right way, so your finances are managed well. For this, you need to have access to a lot of critical information all the time. Companies typically did not move these information to the cloud because these are mission critical. These are like extremely sensitive and secretive. They tended to keep it within their premises. But now this pandemic has forced companies to move all their applications, all their operations to the cloud, both for productivity and to keep their operations going, right? So even mission critical operations are moving to the cloud. And this is one shift that companies must be aware of, how securely and safely they can move all their operations, not just regular ones like doing communication, doing collaboration, but also their mission critical activities to the cloud.
Rajesh, this is Danie. I'm just going to jump in and ask a question when we talk about our financial institutions like banks. During this pandemic, they've actually, not a lot of banks were able to shift into a complete work from home scenario. They had to still keep their employees in the physical locations because of security issues. Is it actually ever going to be a possibility that everyone can work from home? Is this something we are prepared for infrastructure-wise, but also security-wise? Or will we have to accept that there will always be people that need to be for secure banking transactions in physical locations?
Right. Yeah, I would not answer it as in binary, right? It will have to be always work from home, or it will always have to be work from office. What this has told us all, taught us all, this pandemic situation is to be ready with multiple options, right? So regardless of if you are healthcare or or in financials or in education, you must be ready with operating with multiple models where all your employees, all your users could work from wherever they are. It could be home or wherever they are stuck with, or from their office. And this is how companies should look at this situation and make sure they are ready with all the operations possible. To give you an example, at ManageEngine, at our company, so we have thousands of people spread around the geography of India, right? So they are all in their hometowns, they are all in their home villages, unable to come to one place, one big city to work together. So what we are doing is building multiple satellite offices, right? So where 20, 30 people could go and work together. So what this is doing is multiple models are coming out where all the people go to office and work, all the employees could sit at home and work, and also you're looking at truly decentralized and distributed models of working, right? So whether you are a bank, whether you are a healthcare, you have to be ready with working with multiple models of operation and also multiple distributed workplaces, so to say.
All right, Rajesh, I want to pick up from what Danie asked there earlier. Network infrastructure is always going to be a challenge here in the country, in the Philippines. So how might that affect migration to cloud? And at the same time, security concerns, they will always be at the forefront when you're talking about handling of data and cybersecurity here. So how can companies ensure the privacy and the security of their data as well?
Right. This is again an important question. So to start with, right, so you decided to make the move to the cloud to basically enable a distributed workforce taking care of how their work gets done. I will start with three very, very important things in terms of security. The first one is to have good process and good tools about how do you handle insider threats, right? Because once you talk about this distributed mode of working, your attack surface increases immensely, right? Previously, you had only your premises to protect you. You knew your network boundaries. Now you do not know where employees are connecting from, which network they connect from, which device they use. So your attack surface increases. So you need to have a good watch of what your employees are doing, what your insiders are doing, right? So you have like very good tools available, very good standards available on how to keep track. So number one, I would say is how do you keep track of insider activities? Number two is very, very important, becoming very important. As I talked about, you have no idea about what devices people use anymore to get their official work done. It could be their corporate devices, it could sometimes be personal devices, and sometimes it could be even borrowed devices, right? And corporate devices are freely used by family members of employees when they continue to work from home for a longer period of time. So managing and securing these end points, so to say, the end devices is the second important aspect for companies. You want to make sure they are patched all the time. There are no virus in those devices, no malware in those devices. You have to make sure up to the last second, the security portion of the device is 100%, right? So that is point number two. And the third very, very important thing is to continuously train people about the importance of security. Because in the last 6 months, the number of social engineering and phishing attacks have gone like 400-500 times more than what it was before. Because people are always working from home, always working in isolation, the mode of working is phone calls. They cannot any longer distinguish between what is a valid phone call, legitimate phone call, to what is phishing. Because you get like so many phone calls a day, it is easy for people to give off sensitive information. The Twitter hack was a classic case of social engineering, right? It was a big hack, but the hack was very, very simple. You called an employee, asked for some information, they gave it to the attacker, right? So the third important point is to continuously educate people about how important security is. So I would say insider threats, secure endpoints, and continuously keep educating your employees and users as one way to approach this move to cloud, and also to make sure your security is of top order.
All right, so security will always be an issue when we're talking about cloud migration, but there are tools and systems available there. Thank you very much, Rajesh Ganesan. He is a Vice President of ManageEngine Division of Zoho Corporation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, Jester. My pleasure, Danie. Thank you very much. You all have a good day. Bye-bye.
All right, quick check on a couple of stocks I still need to get through this morning. First of all is Pilipinas Shell. That is as they are looking to sell their stake in the Balampaya gas to power project. So that, of course, this specific power project supplies 1/5 of our electricity requirements. So they're looking for a buyer. They own 45% stake in the venture. This is according to DOE Secretary Alfonso Cusi. Now, this, of course, comes as the natural gas field is actually, the contract will be expiring on 2024. And according to some studies, the depletion will be by 2027. Recall that a unit of Chevron had already sold to Udena Corporation. So 45% is already owned by Udena Corporation. Now, while the sale, Shell spokesman said the company is exploring options with a view to divest in its interest as part of an ongoing portfolio rationalization. Take a look at Shell, though, this morning, up by 0.12%. Now, who are the interested bidders? One in particular is, of course, San Miguel. This is our biggest conglo in the country by revenue. It's interested in the stake. That's according to their president, Ramon Ang. They have not elaborated to what extent their interest is, but he just says they are interested. San Miguel up by 20 centavos. That's 0.2%. Meanwhile, Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi says, this from the Philippine Star, is that this, even if the operator, of course, that Shell exits, they will still proceed in applying for the project's extension. So he said this will not, of course, impact in any way how they will be extending for the contract. So just a very quick peek at how our equities are performing this morning, whether we have actually gotten better. I did have a check earlier on in the broadcast, and it does seem that the big performers are the ones that are reversing fortune. So Bloomberry, for instance, was one of the worst sold off there after PAGCOR revealed its first half revenue decline, let's say. So that's up by 2.5%. But you're going to be seeing companies like First Gen. We had been reporting about Gabby Lopez III giving his directorship or part of the board in First Gen. That has slid by more than 2%, together with Pure Gold is also down by 1 9/10%. Pure Gold was the best performer yesterday. So a bit of a reversal of fortunes from yesterday's trade as our index climbs its way back up to 5,900 levels. That's up by 0.2%. And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Friday, September 25. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And catch us again Monday next week at 10 in the morning. I'm Jess Delos Santos, VR1 News. Have a great weekend.